Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Stoney Shamans Corner. I am the Dreaming Turtle, and I will be your guide. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different and go back to more of a shamanic type subject. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of having a vision quest or purposely seeking a vision quest in its multiple forms, different ways, the benefits, the downsides, all of that stuff. So let's do it. And today we don't have just any blunt, we got a hash blunt. This is a Crops King syrup wrap with a little bit of this Northern Lights flower that my friends grew. And for the hash, we got some of this Purple Punch too. From Greenleaf Medical in Richmond, Virginia. I got a few nice little chunks and some little bits spread throughout the first, well, a little bit more than half of that blunt. So this could get interesting. So without any further ado, I do believe we're going to spark this up. Nice. So the first thing we want to bring up is for those who don't already know what a vision quest is, what is a vision quest? Well, typically talking about seeking a vision quest is intentionally putting yourself sort of between the worlds in an altered state of conscious in order to seek out a vision. Typically, or at least the most common known form of doing this, is going to be through some type of hallucinogen. The cannabis can be a method of getting there. However, cannabis is not nearly as an effective method of getting there as, something like psilocybin, peyote, or what's it, the ingredient, mescaline, muscaline, whatever you call it, or LSD. And there are some other harder ones that there was a ancient recipe that used belladonna and basically lard or fat in order to create a rub that you would, literally rub on your body. And this, along with some of the other things like thornapple or Jimson, please do not try those. I mean, the more extreme they are, the more powerful it's going to be if you do seek out a vision quest. However, because walking between the worlds can literally be walking between life and death. So the stronger the hallucinogen is, the more powerful the vision is going to be. On the other hand, it's so easy to overdo or just do the normal way and cross that line, if you feel what I'm saying, not come back either physically, mentally, or both. And there are other methods of achieving this that aren't really talked about as much. One is the use of blood bindings and sensory deprivation. Sensory deprivation is actually one that I highly recommend because, especially if you've got somebody that you trust to supervise you, sensory deprivation can be a much safer method of seeking out a vision. Maybe not as effective as some of the stronger hallucinogens, just because, it doesn't kind of force you into that lane, that altered state of conscious. But it works. It does work. And it's, like I said, blood bindings can be tricky because, you're cutting off your circulation. But sensory deprivation can be a very fruitful method. Dreams, for a reason that I'm going to explain here in a minute, is another pretty effective method, except that it can get decoding can get a lot more tricky with seeking a vision through a dream quest, just because the dreams are kind of like the Wild West of visions. That's where most natural visions come from. But especially, if you're traveling the astral plane, so to speak, you can kind of crisscross, or at least theoretically, with other people's subconscious, or what they call the universal subconscious. And so, yeah, that can be a little bit more tricky. Part of that is just theoretical, and I want to try to stick to the stuff that is a little bit more concrete. If you don't already know, I consider myself a neo-shaman, which is to say a secular neo-shaman, which is to say, I try to stick to what I can confirm, what is, at least in my mind, without question. Which brings us to the language of vision quests and dreams, because they are one in the same, which is why dreaming is an effective method of having a vision quest. And if you want to get more depth onto this, check out the video I did a little while back on managing hallucinations with dream psychology. But in a nutshell, hallucinations come from the same part of your brain that dreams come from, which operates in, or speaks, we'll say, in very measured symbols and metaphors. Excuse my squeakies. So, for instance, if I'm dreaming about a friend of mine, or let's go to the extreme and say that I dream about a friend of me killing a friend of mine, or have a hallucination or a vision of me killing a specific friend of mine. That's very easy to take the wrong way, obviously, because it's kind of like pulling the death card in a tarot spread, which I think we're going to also cover that too, because technically forms of divination are also technically vision quests. So we want to get into some of that too. But generally having a vision, hallucination, or a dream, whatever you want to call it, whichever form you get it, is generally going to be a manifestation of yourself. So in that hallucination or dream, whatever, the other person represents you. Something that you see in that other person that at least on a subconscious level you recognize in yourself. So killing that other person within the hallucination or the dream would represent a desire to change that about you, to kill that part of yourself because it's something that you don't like about yourself or that you recognize might be a negative tendency within yourself. So it's really important to understand the language in which these visions, dreams, hallucinations, speak, because it's not going to be a literal interpretation. It's said, just like I said about pulling the death card in a tarot spread, it doesn't actually represent death. It represents change or a rebirth, so to speak. And I want to, keep in mind too that I don't do vision quests anymore, which is to say that I don't actively seek out my visions anymore, just because I've spent my whole life walking between the worlds. As I talked about in the pilot episode for this series of videos, I've basically been walking between the worlds on the line between life and death my entire life since I was an infant. And pneumonias after pneumonias throughout my entire life. And to top that off, especially post my brain injury, I've had naturally occurring hallucinations pretty much my entire life. And so if you're already somebody like me that's already open to walking between the worlds without assistance, I do actually recommend that you don't seek out the visions, that you let the visions come to you, because sometimes, at least I don't really have an explanation for this. I'm getting away from sticking with the concrete stuff, but in my experience, the more important visions that you need to have tend to come to you. And so sometimes if you go seeking out your visions a little bit too often, those important visions can become a little bit convoluted. So if there's a situation in my life that I need to advice on, or that I can't necessarily turn to another person doesn't understand, or whatever reason, I tend to want to go to the other methods, which that I mentioned earlier. Things like, at least the big one for me that I have used a lot over the years, has been the tarot cards. Because, most people completely have the wrong idea about tarot cards and think that they don't work because they don't work the way that most people think that they work. There's nothing magical, there's nothing supernatural or anything like that about the tarot cards. The tarot cards simply use your power of thinking and meditation and contemplating the issues that you are trying to figure out, and come to the best possible outcome, if that makes sense. The idea is that you're not on a fixed path. There's forks along the path, and you can choose those forks. And so if you can use your power of meditating, of thinking about your problems, and and use the tarot cards as a tool to observe your past situation, your current situation, your potential future situation, the factors that got you to where you are. um, if you can use all of those tools to look at your future and see that it doesn't look like it's probably going to go the way that you were hoping for it to go, then you've got a little bit of foresight ahead of time to maybe do things a little bit different to try to live a little bit more positively along the wheel, to get yourself right, to restore that yin and yang, the spokes on the wheel. And so, because the tarot cards are a way of using your own power of thinking, we'll just say thinking, to seek out a vision, it is technically a form of a vision quest. I would call it a vision quest light, because you're not trying to reach a full state of altered conscious to the point where you're like walking between the worlds, walking between that life and death, the awake or the conscious and subconscious. It's more of just a thing of conscious meditation. And the tarot cards, I highly recommend, learning the tarot cards, as long as you can understand that first rule to it and how it works. I highly recommend the tarot cards. And, don't be embarrassed either. If you've got to carry around a good book to look up the cards as you're going through the spread, do it. Just do it. And use your own power of reasoning, to go from there. Because, again, the problem with having an effective altered conscious walking between the conscious worlds, through a vision quest like, well, even peyote and worse to, belladonna or Jimson, something along those lines. Even if you don't die, you can really overdo it and throw the spokes off of balance, if you feel what I'm saying, And when things get off of balance, when we get off of balance, what tends to happen? If you're riding your bike down the street, or you're riding a motorcycle, or even just a 50cc scooter down the road, and this has happened to me, where you lose your balance, you fall down. And don't get me wrong, you can always dust yourself off, or at least you can always dust yourself off and try again until you can't. So as we walk along the wheel and you're trying to reach your destination, get back up as often as you can. Get back up until you can't get back up, and just understand what that means to not be able to get back up. It's either the complete end, or it's the embrace into the negative part of the mind to overwhelm that positive charge. And, that's not a pleasant path. That's not a peaceful path, if you feel me. And dream psychology, obviously, I've already recommended that highly. And, I definitely recommend to, learn about dream psychology and understanding the symbols and the metaphors, because that's a really, really big, that's a crucial step in any vision quest, whether you're seeking out a vision or whether you're waiting for a vision to come to you. if you can't decode the language, it doesn't make a bit of difference. So I highly, highly, highly can't stress that enough. So highly recommend getting into learning about dream psychology. And just to brush up again, some of the essential things to understand about dream psychology is that there's going to be universal symbolisms between large groups of people. And there's also going to be some unique symbolizations between people, depending on people's feelings and attachments, whatever you want to call it, toward certain things. One of the, as I was learning about dream psychology, one of the examples that I read was, imagine that you never lived in a castle. You're always, the things that you see in media, whatever, about castles has got your mindset about castles as something fancy, something, grand, whatever you want to call it. But then put that next to a person who's grew up in a castle. And so what a castle to them might be something cold and dusty and, whatever else. Maybe, who knows? I didn't grow up in a castle, so I don't really know. But dreaming about a castle would be two completely different symbolisms between those people. And the same thing for having a vision or a hallucination, understand that. That's important to understand about hallucinations, that essentially dreaming and having a vision to an extent, a vision is part revelation and part hallucination, so it's important to understand that hallucination isn't just a hallucination, that the hallucination comes from the conscious, subconscious, and possibly, I believe so, universal subconscious. A universal subconscious being where we're all sort of connected together along these strings. Beyond the 13th dimension, as they would say, M theory shit. And so basically, it's like the old legends or, mythology, whatever you want to call it, about the astral planes. It's kind of the same thing. And as a matter of fact, I actually one time did seek out it wasn't so much, at least when I did it, it wasn't so much of a vision quest. It was that I was kind of, experimenting, if you will, with sort of astral projection, or seeking to go into somebody else's dream, to, connect with somebody specific on the astral plane. And, this can work, this method works better, really, for seeking a vision, because, you are seeking a specific thing that, you probably have an answer to inside yourself. You just got to look. And sometimes it takes digging into our subconscious to find those answers. So, basically all it really is again the power of meditation, by concentrating on whatever the issue is at hand, whatever you're trying to figure out, and just concentrating on it as hard as you can until you fall asleep. And so that, the idea is that you go to sleep with that specifically driving your thoughts. And, I believe, I'm not going to get into the details of who I tried to visit and everything, but I do believe that worked. But I have in the past also dreamt about or tried to, you know, figure things out. And, you know, before in my dreams when I was younger, because somebody told me that as a kid, you know, if you want to figure something out or, you know what's going to happen, whatever, you know, then concentrate on it as you're falling asleep. And, but I can't say that didn't work or anything because, you know, I was like, I don't know how old I was. I was probably like maybe 6 or 7, if that, when I was told that. And I didn't know how the fuck dreams worked, much less how to actually interpret a dream. So, ixnay on that or whatever you want to call it. But it can work. Again, as much as I don't really want to say this, but the most powerful method of seeking a vision is going to be through the hallucinatory path. The hallucinogen on its own isn't enough because you still need the power of meditation and a little bit of depth and foresight into what you're seeking. But you know, some of these hallucinogens can alter your conscious so much that, you know, it's like a little bit of that subconscious kind of comes to the surface a little bit, but it's still speaking in that language. It's just a little closer up, a little easier to reach, if you know what I'm saying. And you know, so the most safe thing that you can use to reach that, which does get you closer than a I guess a sober state, for lack of better words, is cannabis. You know, you're not going to consume anything to alter your conscious that's safer than cannabis. 100, nothing. And that is the only thing that I use currently. I haven't used anything really other than cannabis. Well, cannabis and like caffeine and nicotine, you know, stuff like that in about 20 years. By the way, I got videos up about some of that stuff too back in the catalog if you want to look it up. All that being said, cannabis is not the most effective vision seeking substance out there. The next closest I would probably, that is somewhat effective, I would probably say would be psilocybin, or mushrooms. But you do have know what you're consuming. And I should preface that by saying too, the same still with cannabis is know what you're consuming. You know, that's the thing that I love the most about, well, one of the two things I love the most about the legalization of cannabis is, one, not criminalizing people for smoking something that's literally safer than a couple Advil. If pure, if clean, if natural, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying. And which is the other thing that I love about legalization, if we can focus in on that, is that right there. You see what I'm saying? The right to know what you're consuming. Third party tested. Not to mention a little bit of selection, you know, and availability. But psilocybin, there is at least one species of psilocybin that is poison. and will probably kill you. So, know what you're consuming. And I haven't done I've never tried peyote, but I think that peyote is probably going to be more effective than shrooms, but more dangerous. Um, know what you're consuming, and especially once you get up to psilocybins and peyote, um, know your limits. Know the limits, because the stronger it is, the more of a chance that overdoing it could be catastrophic. With weed, it's pretty simple. If you smoke too much, you maybe pass out and maybe wake up mildly stoned. Yeah, well, there was one time, we smoked a whole quarter ounce in a one of those socket things, and just put a little screen on the end of it, and packed the whole quarter up in there, sat and smoked the whole thing, burned for like hours. But I crashed out and woke up like, I don't know, several hours later, getting up to go do my paper route, and still stoned, still blazed. And I also have done the what we used to call the RoboTrips, which is basically, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's dextrochlorohoromorphine or something like that. But it's that one gets probably a little bit more dangerous than the peyote, and that one, I mean, that one's kind of a no non-starter now anyway, since they passed the started the regulatory thing that requires the people who make the cough syrups like Robitussin to add an extra ingredient. That basically what it does is, if you try to chug the whole bottle, if you try to chug it down, you're going to end up sitting over the toilet puking your guts out the whole night. So RoboTripping, well, I'm not really so sorry to say, because that was kind of stupid to do in the first place. But, that's a non-thing now, RoboTripping is a thing of the past. And also, while I'm on my treadmill or whatever you want to call it, about knowing what you consume, is, also stuff like Delta 8. Well, first, K2 and, all that spice shit. Fuck that shit. You don't want that shit. No, fuck that shit. That's some bullshit. And Delta 8, honestly, I mean, you can do what you want to do, but understand that Delta 8 is essentially CBD cooked in sulfuric acid, basically battery acid. And also, with concentrates, real cannabis concentrates, the difference between rosin and like shatter or wax is that, shatter and wax is made with solvents like butane, whereas something like rosin is literally just the juice from the plant. It's just, you just press it out of the plant with a heat press. So, I'm just saying, know what you're consuming. But yeah, outside, I think of psilocybin, peyote, and obviously cannabis. But again, not as effective for serious vision quests. But outside of those, I really highly recommend staying away from pretty much all of them. Because, like I said, I mean, you've probably got better than a 50% chance of surviving a belladonna trip. Maybe. If it's mixed right. I mean, and there's a small enough amount of it. to still make you trip, but not like kill you. But if you survive, it still might fuck up your brain. And thorn apple, no, 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 no. I don't know the actual statistics or whatever. Full disclosure. But I've heard that, doing Jimson is about 50-50 about whether you're going to make it through the trip. Again, know what you're consuming. And, ironically, the stronger it is, and in some instances, the deadlier that it is, the more powerful the visions you're probably going to get. But you gotta, it's kind of like, what's his name? Ichabod Crane, no, Icarus or whatever, flying too close to the sun. You gotta know your limit. You gotta know the limit. Because once you stop walking that wheel, that's it. And remember that when you stop walking that wheel, how that affects the paths going forward for the people around you, the energy and trauma, or memories and or trauma for the people around you, and more importantly, the people that care about you and the people that you care about. That love. And on the subject of love, I feel like we really ought to bring up karma again. And when I'm talking to karma, I'm not talking about a system of rewards and punishments for doing good things or bad things. I'm talking about a force of nature, basically getting back the energy that you're pushing in. Or so to speak, eating the shit sandwiches that you make, or reaping the rewards of your harvest. Because what karma really is, or at least as I view karma, as I personally view karma, is a force of nature. It's force. If you push something, there's going to be push back. There's going to be pushback. And it's not just doing something good or well-intentioned and getting something good back. It's sort of like ease versus force, I guess. Something happening fluently and something being forced to happen. And the only reason I'm bringing karma up is just because if you do believe, like I believe, that, you get what you put down, comes back around as we walk the wheel over and over and over and over, that seeking out vision quests is also, you don't want to put, it's the same thing with not trying, like, for instance, the ancient belladonna recipe, because that's a lot of force that if eventually that force comes back, then it's going to hit you. Obviously, that's why we say eating the shit sandwich that you made. Or at least that's one of my sayings. And believe me, we all eat the shit sandwiches that we make. All of us. Myself definitely included. And, I'm not really saying don't have a vision quest, because absolutely, sometimes you should have a vision quest. The question is how far are you going to go to get the vision quest? And how often you're going to do something like that. Because, I guess another metaphor for that would be losing the magic, so to speak. where it becomes a regular thing. Like I had some friends of mine with acid that used to drop acid like sometimes twice a week. And, that it got to a thing where it was just kind of normal to be tripping to the point that that becomes the normal language, which means you're going to be less susceptible to recognizing visions. And you're going to be more susceptible to losing yourself into the psychosis. Because make no mistake about it, going into a trance, so to speak, that's a term we haven't really used so far, and it's a fitting thing because going into a trance or an altered state of conscious is technically what we would refer to as a psychosis. Sort of a delusion in that, you can't, leading things or looking at things at face value, at literal value, would be delusional. Because, all glory to the man, he was he was an incredible mark in the history, or he was an incredible thing to have happened in the history of music. But you don't want to end up like Syd Barrett. I don't have anything bad to say about Syd Barrett because I appreciate the creativity that he had. I appreciated the music that he put out, and that early Pink Floyd. But it's not exactly a hot button or hot take or anything like that. Syd Barrett lost himself in that psychosis. And that's, falling onto the other side, getting lost in that other side of the worlds. When you get to the point that you can't tell reality from the vision or the hallucination and the psychosis, you've gone way too far. I guess the easy way would be saying that what's the point of being that constant in the hallucinatory, psychotic world if you're not in touch enough with reality to put those visions to any benefit. The lower tier methods will say, starting with cannabis, going down to the things like tarot cards and meditations, and probably I'll say sensory deprivation as an exception to this, but most all of those lower tier things and safer things, are, that's a lot safer things to use on a daily basis. The only reason I really exclude the sensory deprivation from that is just because sensory deprivation is a much deeper or effective, I guess, of the lower tier methods of having a vision quest, of reaching that altered state of conscious. So, I think you could overdo sensory deprivation by doing it too much. And that's not something that I commonly do. I think I've done sort of sensory deprivation maybe once or twice, but it hasn't been like, real sensory deprivation. It's been kind of half-ass sensory deprivation. But remember, at the end of the day, too, that it's all inside of you. and getting back to that universal subconscious, that string that binds all of us together, is that it's all inside of you, including all of it and everything that's out there across the universe and possibly the multiverse. Who knows beyond what? It's some strings getting plucked, is basically what I'm saying. It's all in you. You're every woman, or, or you're every dude. We'll just say it that. You're every dude. Well, and everything else, too. So I guess we're going to go ahead and call it a wrap right there. Bum stiggity bum hunt. Thank you all for coming and hanging out and hearing what I got to say, my philosophy a little bit. And I hope it either helped you or you learned something new. That's always gravy, baby. I always like to be able to help. If you've got anything to add or questions or comments, or you just want to call me a fat ass or something, leave it down in the comments. I try to get back to comments at the very least usually by the time I upload my next video. Remember my philosophy for moving forward in life positively, that you never have to be the best at anything. You can't be the best at everything, but you can always be better than you were the day before. And to that, cheers. Love you, babies. Hootie. Hoo. I love you. See you in the next one, guys. Bye. We are rolling, little dude. Yeah, I'm saying though, get over here where they can see you. I mean, yeah. You're my little dude. Yeah. I'm trying to get you to lay down and chill. Yeah. Are you claiming my chair? This is my chair, little jerk. This is my chair. Or are you claiming me by proxy of the chair? Ain't nothing for you in there. Get back over here. Get over here. You want to show all your fans how you do the squirrel? You want to show everybody how you do a squirrel? Come on. Do the squirrel. Do the squirrel. Come on. You know the squirrel. You know how to do the squirrel. Oh, that's a good squirrel. Yes, it is. That's a good squirrel right there. Yes, he is. That's a good squirrel.